Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Carmine's Arena, a cultural gourmet of information, if you will, a feast for your mind and soul. And now, without further delay, the man, the myth, the maestro, Carmine Arena.
Greetings and welcome once again to Carmine's Arena, site of contest and conflict, venue for and of resolution. Resolution in terms of focus, remedy, and commitment, both yours and mine, to the preservation, the propagation, and indeed the celebration of Western civilization. In a surviving fragment, the ancient Greek poet Archilochus makes reference to the furry-tailed fox and the hedgehog, whose coat is shaggy and carries sharp spines growing out of its back. These spines bristle when the need arises and form a natural and hardy defense when the animal curls up, fortified even when encircled. The fox, observed the poet, knows many things, but the hedgehog knows one big thing. Thus each of us, Americans, who loves his and or her country, must become its fortress behind which is developed a sharp and determined focus to protect our great nation. For we have never known greater encirclement from concentric hatreds, ceaselessly at work to expose our vulnerability by enemies within America's porous borders. Enemies of a parasitic persuasion, either foreign-blown or homegrown, made ready to divide and conquer whilst remaining unknown. 'Tis best also to bear in mind that a chatterbox in a Mad Hatter's soapbox is eyeing our strong box just after winning at the ballot box, guarded by, say, the likes of Black Panther warlocks. The latter ready to open a Pandora's box and to turn this country into a third world tinderbox. Read before you leftists scoff. Read, as I've read, the chapter entitled Black Murder Incorporated from David Horowitz's book, The Black Book of the American Left. Mr. Horowitz was once a fervent champion and fundraiser for this far-out group of the Panther faithful, whose bloodthirsty guilt nonetheless led one of its stalwart members to publicly admit in these words, and I quote, "Faith was all there was. If I did not believe in the ultimate rightness of our goals and our Panther Party, then what we did, what Huey Newton was doing, what he was, what I was horrible." Unquote. Yes, I challenge each and every one of my leftist critics to dare read David Horowitz, an erstwhile long-time self-admitted communist. Yes, read his book, even carelessly, before challenging with knee-jerk, short-shrift reasoning what is disclosed therein by a once firm, zealous advocate of the enemy within. But truth to tell, when and if a leftist changes his mind, it's called evolving. When a conservative changes his mind, it's called flip-flopping. Nonetheless, I personally believe changing your mind is an admirable exercise, lending continued muscle to rhyme, reason, and ratiocination. The latter meaning one's ability to argue logically, as against arguing faithfully despite mutual evidence to the contrary. The left loves to scorn, and thus bollycorn their shoehorned confabulations before human reason or ration. 'Tis in their base-born, wayward nature. Now, why must we fully attend to the utterly evolved pronouncements evoked by the likes of David Horowitz? Well, it's because the gentleman has been on the inside world of the left and has, over the years of radical action and experience, grown familiar with its innards, right up to his visceral aversion to its enchantments. Thus moving from a fox with many ideas to a hedgehog with one big idea: America's survival. He spent the first part of his life in the precincts of the communist progressive left, a politics he inherited from his mother and father. Then later in the so-called deceptively repackaged New Left as one of its founders. These credentials make his spiny, bristling words of warning stick in one's consciousness to a degree that beggars any mounted left-wing assault. He's become a fortress from which is targeted the fraudulent inducements of the enemy, who would hold aloft the paraded profiles of Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Stalin. Hold them aloft with ardent exultation. Yet I, for one, shall never neglect to recall the recorded statement from the tainted lips of Lenin, who in an unbuttoned, unguarded moment confessed that freedom is so precious, it must be rationed. God can grant us free will, but not a commie. When the wreckage Mr. Horowitz and his comrades had created became clear to him in the mid-1970s, he bolted from its false attractions and unkept promises. 3 decades of second thoughts then made Horowitz this once New Left founder, that movement's principal intellectual antagonist, a hedgehog, so morphed, so to speak, as to be condemned to spend the rest of his days attempting to undo his earlier foxy agendas. When Horowitz became, or I should say when Horowitz began his odyssey, the left had already escaped the political ghetto to which his parents' generation and his own had been confined. Today, my friends, it has emerged the dominant force in America's academic and media cultures, electing a president and achieving a position from which it can shape America's weakened future. How it achieved its present success and what that success portends are overarching subjects of Horowitz's conservative writings. Through the unflinching focus of one singularly engaged witness, the identity of a destructive movement that has deceived naive politicians and everyday folk, a movement that constantly reshapes itself in order to conceal its identity and mission becomes, thanks to Mr. Horowitz, disturbingly clear. In his book, The Black Book of the American Left, he reflects on the years he spent at war with his own country, collaborating with and comforting the likes of Huey Newton, Tom Hayden, and Bill Ayers, as he made his transition from the American left's most important theorist to its most determined, best informed, and enlightened enemy. When you read Horowitz's book, pay special attention to the chapter entitled Black Murder Incorporated. As I said to you earlier, it is an eye-opener, from an insider who raised money enough for the Panther Party to buy themselves a Baptist church facility in the East Oakland area, ghetto area, which became a community learning center apart from where Panther leader Huey Newton resided, which was a penthouse 25 stories high, overlooking Oakland Bay. The Black Panther Party, get this, was granted nonprofit status and received giant grants from the government sums of money, gifts and grants, which was all dutifully squandered on the usual drugs, sex, and rock and roll. And the unusual, a now posh address, and an arsenal of weapons, such as AR-18 short automatic rifles, 308 scoped rifles, 30 caliber Garans and M158s and M16s, and a host of other assorted automatic and semi-automatic rifles. The arsenal goes on. Thompson machine and submachine guns, M59 Santa Fe troopers, 55 caliber anti-tank guns, mind you, M60 fully automatic machine guns, innumerable shotguns, and M79 grenade launchers, caches of crossbows and arrows, grenades, and miscellaneous explosive materials and devices. One could go on. That's the Panther arsenal that we can refer to with justification as being vicious, mind-boggling, and the traders that belong to that organization. Bobby Seale, as a co-founder of the Black Panthers, along with his smooth-talking sociopath, Huey Newton, was literally whipped, quite literally, like a black slave, and then personally sodomized by Huey the Loony Newton, attacked with such violence that he had to have surgical repairs performed by a Pacific Heights doctor who was a political supporter of the Panthers. This crime, it must be made clear, was not an act of lust, no, but one of power, as is true of every racist arsonist today. Power and revenue, and ever more revenue, much less than ever reverend, if you get my meaning. And I think you do. Those reverends get my meaning. You want to have a comic relief moment, I believe one is in order. Read Tom Wolfe's essay entitled Radical Chic, a perfect age of Aquarius description of high society socialites and celebrities. One self-cheapened mob of fashionable thinkers, dumbed down to weekend activists. The essay, often riotously funny, mocks the New York Philharmonic conductor Leonard Bernstein, who held a party for the Black Panther treasury. This festive fundraiser was held with consummate elegance. Elegance in play at Bernstein's 13-room penthouse apartment on Park Avenue. Read the essay. You'll enjoy a let-them-eat-cake moment. Only at the Bernstein bash, the guests, instead, had morsels of blue cheese covered with nuts. How apt, don't you think? The rest of the place was covered with nuts on 2 feet. You might even get a gander in the article, Radical Chic, at a photo portrait of the conductor and his lovely wife, Felicia, alongside none other than Don Cox, Field Marshal of the Black Panthers. Thus, it can be said by yours truly that the Bernstein feast went from Roquefort via harpsichord to warlord. You can't make this stuff up. For up to this very moment, the avant-garde loves being avant and doesn't care an olive branch to dropping its god. Yet leftists make up stuff all the livelong day, like Oliver Stone's fantasies, one of which is of a military-industrial conspiracy behind the murder of John F. Kennedy. It justifies the radicals' limitless rage against America itself. Naturally, in fact, preternaturally, Attorney General Eric Holder and his exalted cohort are using soft glove responses to a present Panther duo plotting to blow up the St. Louis Gateway Arch and assassinate 2 key local law enforcement officials in answer to the Ferguson grand jury decision. Yeah, right here it's happening. At this apt juncture, allow me to remind you and my left-winged friends that Barack Obama appeared and marched with members of the Black Panther Party at the campaign for president in Selma, Alabama, in March 2007. Can you imagine Selma? This present-day incarnation of Panthers are now hot to kill Jews and crackers, even a good one before he changes. And by the by, that's a quote. I'm often refreshed by reminding myself and thus clinging to the memory of when America remained united even against its flaws and shortcomings. Today, the racist and anti-Semitic Jew-hating Panthers could whistle a tune or two to wish their darkness away. I'm specifically referring, as but one example, to the immigrant Jew, Irving Berlin, who, as a non-Christian, wrote the classics, I'm Dreaming of a White Christmas, Easter Parade, and God Bless America, refusing as a patriotic act any royalties for God Bless America. This, in a way, was grateful payback from the composer who came to America fleeing from the Russian land of his birth to escape the Jewish persecution of his community. He remained a profound patriot till his death at the age of 101. Now, along with the ever-American Irving Berlin, we have David Horowitz, David Mamet, Norman Podhoretz, and Irving Kristol, once all hardcore left-leaning zealots having evolved into book-writing atona, alerters, and advocates of neoconservatism cured in and from Marxian mockery and schlockery. I personally am happy that, though yet a child, I experienced the American triumph over evil conducted by the greatest generation. Yet again, thanks to the squandering of prosperity and common sense, we are broke and still again living in unsafe times. Civil disobedience reduced to looting, politics reduced to mere optics, jihadists and the Muslim Brotherhood dedicated to the extinction of Israel and all Jews. Jews, may I remind one and all, who are among the very first people to be enslaved. Read another Jewish book, won't you? It's called the Holy Bible. Then there's the criminal syndicate of academia, which is committed to sanitizing the god-awful stink of secular progressive interlinks and leftist media inc. as they slink from one disguise to another contrary-wise franchise, giving professorships, mind you, to felons and radical simpletons who have the intellection of phantoms. For example, have you heard of the college professor who makes his students recite an anti-American pledge of allegiance? If you sign up for Denver College Professor Charles Angeletti's American Civilization class, can you imagine? Be forewarned that you're going to have to recite his invective-filled new pledge, and according to students, also be ready to swallow a big helping of his politics. Angeletti, who teaches at the Metropolitan State University of Denver, has students learn an anti-American version of the pledge that denounces the U.S. as a Republican-controlled bastion of injustice, all the while spewing his own far-left brand of cures. According to current and former students, listen to the professor's version of the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to and wrap myself in the flag of the United States against anything un-American, and to the republicans for which it stands, two nations under Jesus, rich against poor, with curtailed liberty and justice for all except blacks, homosexuals, women who want abortions, communists, welfare queens, tree huggers, feminazis, illegal immigrants, and you, if you don't watch your step, unquote. This self-proclaimed atheist and socialist crowing professor has been distributing the pledge to his class for nearly 20 years now as part of his stuck-in-the-mud lesson plan, a plan which should officially be changed each semester, at least cosmetically. Why, by now, as I said earlier, he can phone the damn plan in. We're very racist, says this professor. Yes, I quote him. We're very repressive. We're very Christian-oriented, forgetting conveniently that the very first abolitionists were active within the Christian precincts and pews of churches. The professor goes on to declare that we just don't tolerate other kinds of thinking in this country, but only his, apparently. Isn't that odd? And not from somewhere abroad, but at a government-endowed university right smack here in Denver, Colorado, USA. Talk about a fox in the henhouse. Ergo, this historically sanitized spiel is typical elite progressive postmodernist garbage spewed in the sick professor's classroom with ex-military veterans in attendance. We have seen this again and again, time after time, lessons stacked against stacked decks dealt to veterans, which basically asserts you fought for nothing, you fought for a lie. Described as an easy grader who only punishes conservatives, it says much about this professorial hater. Many students claim Professor Angeletti's endless classroom rants were routinely unfocused. One related that all this teacher does is ask what is on your mind at the start of every lesson, and that is how the class is run every day based on what students say. The only reason I got a B is because I hardly showed up to this class since it was pointless. All he does is argue with everything you say, and you are always wrong. Thus, you're rewarded for non-attendance. You see, he could phone the lesson in, as I said, and there you have academia, suffering pernicious academia anemia. My dear friends, you can see that we are marinating in liquids of iniquity and leftist aromas, which permeate most crevices of American vilification, suffering their noise. The daily din of tantrums from the ignorance of the learned. The leftist foxes are often self-betrayed, by the way, as swans. Little to do they know that those such as Carmine Arena are on to them. As swans, for all their grace and external beauty, are aggressive, virile, violent, and sexually oriented creatures. Their only merit is that they mate for life. And thus I commend, as opposed to leftist fanatics who make a fate worse than death. That's what they mate with. At death, their song will be a hiss. A hiss. The hedgehog knows otherwise, for unlike the fox, who knows many things, the ball of bristles and potential quills knows one big thing: surviving. And that is why it's important for you to read David Horowitz's book about the American left. It is a masterpiece. Till next, when we shall continue to ring out our enemies' scornings, keep the faith against those incoming wayward dismantlings, ever a-borning.
If you have any comments or other remarks, and that I perhaps could even read on some of these broadcasts, please do not hesitate to write to me, Carmine Arena, P.O. Box 1029, Larchmont, New York 10538.